On April 6, 1968, Leonard Rayne Moses and others threw Molotov cocktails at a house during civil unrest in Pittsburgh that followed the assassination of the famous civil rights activist Martin Luther King Jr. Mary Amplo, who was inside the house at the time, was badly burned from the attack. She died a few months later from pneumonia while recovering from the burns. Moses was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole in 1970 for killing Amplo. He was 16 years old at the time of the conviction. In March 1971, Moses' case was brought before the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania to appeal his life sentence. His lawyers argued he was too young to make a voluntary waiver of his Miranda warnings. At the end of the court session, 2 justices provided dissenting opinions, concluding the case should be remanded for a new trial. Despite the court victory, Moses escaped custody on June 1, 1971, while attending his grandmother's funeral in Pittsburgh. He managed to escape despite being escorted by 2 police officers. After Moses escaped custody, he assumed the identity of Paul Dickson, which he has used since at least 1999. He used the alias while he was employed as a traveling pharmacist in Michigan, said Christman. In 2020, the FBI announced the arrest of Leonard Rayne Moses, nearly half a century after he escaped custody in 1971. Moses was arrested at his home in Grand Blanc, Michigan, on November 12th by the FBI's Detroit Fugitive Task Force. A native of Vienna, born October 2, 1889, Karl Manari immigrated to New York in 1914, obtaining a job at the German Oddfellows home in Yonkers during July of that year. Using the name Frederick Moores, Manari worked for 6 months at the home, arousing no suspicions as he went about his duties. Patients came and went throughout his tenure, several leaving in a hearse, but they were old and no one gave a second thought to their demise before the early days of February 1915. On the afternoon of February 2nd, Moores presented himself at the district attorney's office dressed in a corduroy hunting outfit, complete with knee pants and a feathered alpine cap. Approaching the desk sergeant, Manari confessed to the murders of 8 superannuated octogenarians, killed in order to make room for more inmates at the home. A phone call confirmed the 8 deaths, all listed as natural, and Manari was taken into custody. In jail, Manari's story underwent a sudden shift. The homicides had not been his idea, he now proclaimed, but rather had been ordered by officials at the home, who described the elderly victims as a lot of trouble and no good anyhow. On February 5th, the home superintendent and 3 more employees were clapped into jail as material witnesses, with the Oddfellows Lodge refusing to muster their bail. Although authorities refused to order exhumation of remains, investigations seemed to bear out Karl Manari's tale of inmates killed with chloroform and arsenic. Manari had warned patient Elizabeth Hauser of her impending death a day in advance, and a mortician recalled red markings similar to chloroform burns on the face of alleged victim Henry Horn. A teenage inmate of the home informed police about an errand she had run on January 4th, delivering a bottle of chloroform from employee Max Ring, jailed as a material witness, to Moores in the room occupied by patient Ferdinand Schultz. Schultz had died the same day, and other inmates suspected Moores of sabotaging the painter's scaffold that dropped Jacob Groh to his death on December 14th. The list went on, but prosecution was deferred in favor of a psychiatric test. Described as not well mentally, Manari was committed to Poughkeepsie's Hudson River State Hospital for the insane. His employer and co-workers were released, the case dismissed with a host of questions still unanswered. On May 10, 1916, a week before his scheduled deportation to Austria, Manari escaped from the hospital in Poughkeepsie and disappeared. He was never recaptured, but authorities took the loss in stride, announcing that the fugitive was not considered dangerous. He was never seen again, but a skeleton found in a patch of woods in Connecticut may have been his. Police found a bottle next to the skeleton that indicated suicide by poison. The world's most successful fugitive has been on the run for more than 60 years, despite repeated appeals to find him over the decades. John Patrick Hannon holds the record for the longest escape from custody after he used a knotted bedsheet to climb over the walls of the Verne Prison in Portland, Dorset, in December 1955. He was 22 at the time of his great escape and has now notched up 6 decades at large. Although he is technically still a wanted man, Dorset police gave up searching for Hannon almost 20 years ago after the last high-profile appeal yielded no results. Hannon would now be aged 81 and is thought to be living back in his home country of Ireland. His time as a fugitive easily eclipses some of Britain's most notorious prisoners' efforts, such as the late train robber Ronnie Biggs, who spent 32 years on the run before giving himself up. The previous longest escape record in the world was 45 years and 11 months, held by Leonard Frisco from Nevada in the US, but was broken by Hannon in 2001. Hannon was jailed at the Old Bailey for 21 months for car theft and assaulting 2 police officers in 1995. But along with fellow inmate Gwyneth Thomas, he scaled the prison walls using knotted sheets to bust out. The pair broke into a nearby petrol station and helped themselves to overcoats, beer, and cigarettes before fleeing the island of Portland. Thomas, also aged 22 at the time, was arrested within 16 hours near Dorchester after the duo were spotted by a lorry driver. But Hannon evaded a major police manhunt, complete with a series of roadblocks and tracker dogs, to make his way to freedom. It is believed he made his way back to his native Ireland soon after his escape. In 1998, Dorset police appealed directly to Hannon to give himself up. In a forced newsletter, they stated, "If you read this, Mr. Hannon, please write in. We'd love to hear from you." A spokesman for Dorset police said they are currently no longer actively searching for Hannon, but would treat any information about his whereabouts with considerable interest. Joanne Chesimard, better known as Assata Shakur, remains a polarizing figure in American history. Born on July 16, 1947 in Queens, New York, Shakur became infamous for her involvement in the killing of a New Jersey state trooper during a 1973 shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike. To this day, the case of Assata Shakur continues to evoke strong emotions, sparking debates about her actions, the circumstances of the trial, and her subsequent escape to Cuba. On May 2, 1973, Assata Shakur, along with 2 fellow members of the Black Liberation Army, BLA, Sundiata Akoli and Zaid Malik Shakur, were traveling on the New Jersey Turnpike when they were pulled over by State Trooper Werner Forster and his partner, Trooper James Harper. What followed was a tragic and violent confrontation that resulted in Trooper Forster's death and the injury of both Assata Shakur and Trooper Harper. Assata Shakur's trial began in 1977, more than 4 years after the shootout on the New Jersey Turnpike. She faced charges including murder, attempted murder, and various other felonies related to the incident. Shakur maintained her innocence throughout the trial, insisting that she had not fired the fatal shot that killed Trooper Forster. The trial was highly contentious, marked by allegations of racial bias, inadequate legal representation, and questionable tactics by the prosecution. Despite these controversies, the jury found Shakur guilty of first-degree murder, assault, and several other charges in March 1977. She was sentenced to life in prison. Assata Shakur's case took a dramatic turn in November 1979, when she escaped from the Clinton Correctional Facility for Women in New Jersey. With the assistance of BLA members posing as visitors, she fled to Cuba, where she was granted political asylum by Fidel Castro's government. Her escape has further fueled debates about her guilt or innocence, as well as the legitimacy of her conviction. In Cuba, Assata Shakur continued to be an outspoken advocate for civil rights, social justice, and Black liberation. She published an autobiography titled Assata, an Autobiography, where she detailed her perspective on the events surrounding her conviction and escape. Her supporters argue that she was a victim of systemic racism and an unfair legal system, pointing to the numerous irregularities in her trial. The case of Assata Shakur has remained a contentious issue in U.S.-Cuba relations. The United States has repeatedly called for her extradition to face the outstanding charges against her. Cuba, however, has consistently refused to hand her over, citing political persecution and human rights concerns.